All right, just as everybody is joining here, I'm going to put up a poll to get so we can get some feedback and see a few thoughts on cybersecurity, and we'll get going in about a minute and a bit. All right, seeing a bunch of people joining. You'll find a poll should pop up. Please take a minute, fill out our poll, get us a little feedback. There's 3 questions in the poll. Will give us a little bit more of a sense of where you're at on the cybersecurity front. All right, AJ, I know we like to honor those that are on time, so we're going to get going and start our this month's webinar. Cybersecurity has changed what you need to know to reduce risk. Welcome, AJ. Very happy to have you here.
Happy to be here.
AJ is our manager of technification, and in addition to being a very smart, good-looking individual, also spends his days managing the cybersecurity for our client base. So I thought it was perfect to have him as part of this month's webinar because he spends a lot of his working life keeping up to date with what's going on in the world of cybersecurity, what the risks are out there. That sort of thing. I see a bunch more people have joined. Please take a minute to fill out our poll. We have about 37% of you have filled it out so far. It'd be great if we could get everybody to fill out our poll. By way of introduction, if you're new to one of our webinars, my name is Brendan Howe. I'm the CEO of Techify. On a monthly basis, usually the 3rd Wednesday of each month, we do these webinars. Our goal is to help people stay up to date with what's happening in the world of technology, and do it in a way that isn't overly technical, is straightforward to understand. Format of these webinars, we do go about half an hour and followed by a Q&A. And so if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A panel as we go through. If we see them as we're going through, we might answer them as we're going through. We will definitely stay on at the end. So we'll give you half an hour of content, and then we'll stay on to answer as many questions as we get, and then we'll sign off. So before we get moving here, a quick plug: our next webinar coming up on May the 15th, so a little bit earlier in May because of the long weekend and some scheduling stuff. But our next webinar we have coming up is called How to Fly High with Copilot. So this is kind of a part 2 or a sequel to our Copilot webinar from last month. So our Copilot webinar last month shattered records. We had over 150 people register for it. Obviously, Microsoft Copilot and AI is a huge topic of interest for folks. So we decided, based on the feedback that we got from that webinar, that we would do a sequel, and that sequel is going into a little bit more detail, taking 5 job roles and showing people how Copilot could be used in those job roles, specifically to make those job roles better. So if you go to, if you just take out your phone, the QR code there that's on your screen, you can register, or you can also go to techify.ca/webinars and register there. And if you're on our mailing list, you'll get a reminder as well. If you are one of our clients, you will also be getting a note either today or tomorrow about our next user-based webinar. AJ does a lot of these webinars for our client base. So this is user-based training, adoption training. We started a series of webinars for the folks that are clients of ours, for their entire teams, entire staff, to learn how to better utilize Microsoft 365 technology. We've got a lot of positive feedback about it. We go through stuff like SharePoint. Last month, we did a prompting, an AI prompting webinar. And next month, we are doing a webinar on Microsoft Teams. And so a lot of people have asked us about doing webinars, virtual events, that sort of stuff on Teams. You'll notice we're doing this one on Zoom. We kind of switch back and forth. We do our client webinar on Teams, and we do this one on Zoom. The reason for Zoom is just some of the integrations a little bit better than where Teams has gotten. But that being said, there's huge opportunities with Teams to do live virtual events, webinars, that sort of stuff. And we get lots of questions about that. So we are going to do a full webinar on it. So let's get into talking about cybersecurity. So I see, based on our poll responses, the vast majority of people that are on this webinar are somewhat confident about the state of cybersecurity. AJ, 0% of people are very confident. And 15% of people are worried about it. Thankfully, we have 69% of folks have cybersecurity insurance. So that's good. We appreciate that. And then there's been a bunch of answers about what folks are most concerned about on the cybersecurity side. So we'll maybe, Aram, if you could pop a few of those answers, if you can pull them from the polling into, I'm going to end the poll now. Pop them in the Q&A, and then we'll chat through them a little bit as we go along. So let's zoom out. AJ, we're going to start zoom out a little bit and talk about what the landscape with the risk, why we have 85% of people are somewhat confident, and it probably has something to do with this. I think we've got 4 stats here that we wanted to talk about a little bit. So estimated 90% of successful cyber attacks start with email phishing. So phishing is where all this stuff is coming from. This is according to Cloudflare's 2023 phishing threats report. And in order to facilitate phishing, about every 20 seconds, there's a new phishing website that's created. And that's what these bad actors are using to access our systems, to dupe people, that sort of thing. And here's to me, the really interesting part. So 75% of security professionals have witnessed an increase in cyber attacks in 2023. And so I think we're all seeing that, the increase in these sort of attacks. Now, the really interesting thing to me is that 85% of them are generative AI powered. So we have all these fantastic opportunities with AI out there. The downside is all these cyber criminals are using AI to basically attack us more. And so we're living in an environment where we're being constantly bombarded, and folks are using the robots, AI, they're weaponizing it to try and get onto our networks. And it's creating an increased threat. And it means we need to do more. And we need to do more because the cost of a breach is so high, right? The cost of a data breach, according to IBM's report last year, has risen to 4.45 million on average. So that's on average across the board. And the disruption, the challenge, the effect on people's businesses, it can't be underestimated, right? So, AJ, why don't we talk a little bit about security philosophy? Like, we're starting at a high level. What should people be thinking in terms of the approach to security?
Thank you, Brennan. Yes, so it all starts with zero trust. Because zero trust tells us that we need to never trust and always verify. It's become a little bit of a meme in the Techify office, where we say never trust, always verify. Trust but verify. So and
Yeah, it's
that
like even
goes.
with the cream, even with the cream in the fridge, right? Never
Yep.
trust, always verify.
Always take a sniff and find out if it's fresh. So, with that said, zero trust tells us that we need to have a philosophy of requiring strict access verification, strict identity verification. That means that the system needs to verify that you say who you say you are. The days of simply putting in a username and a password to say, I'm AJ, is no longer good enough. Because anyone can impersonate you, and that really is where the risk comes in. Now, zero trust is a holistic approach to network security, and it's all about protecting resources, and resources being your user base, your resources being your servers, your infrastructure, really anything that connects to a network. It's about protecting those, be those physical or digital. So even if it's in the cloud or even if it's on-prem, it's about protecting those resources and never assuming the default trust position. And what I mean by that is that those old usernames and passwords. Never just assuming on a username and a password that a person is who they say they are. And good examples of zero trust would be the malware and phishing filtering that goes into your emails, and also giving access to resources on a timed basis. So some of you may know SharePoint. When you share out a file, you can set a limitation to how long someone has access. And that is a good example of zero trust, not allowing someone carte blanche access. And most of these policies, if not all of these policies, are there not only to protect you, but to meet regulatory requirements by enforcing these strict access controls and consistent and ongoing monitoring.
Yeah, and I think the so many of the hacks are based on um, stealing credentials or stealing usernames, passwords, that sort of stuff. And if the philosophy isn't zero trust, if the philosophy is trusting, well, you have the username and password, you should be let in. Then that's where so many of these breaches come. It's a good point. Where this is going to progress, I was reading something the other day about. Actually, I was listening to a podcast about AI, and they were talking about how your voice can now be interpreted by AI and spoofed. So there's people that are using your voice and calling and that sort of stuff. We're going to get to a point with zero trust on the phone. So somebody calls you, and I think it's AJ. It says it's AJ calling, but we're going to get to a point there will be some technology that will verify that you and I are actually you and I talking to each other, and it's not AI, it's not computer generated, and that's where I think stuff is going, which is to me interesting and a little bit scary. So let's continue on with the philosophy, though. Like in terms of security, it's IT's responsibility, right? Like if stuff cybersecurity, it's got to just be the IT department who's responsible.
Well, not exactly. So yes, your IT is responsible, and they're responsible for setting up these policies that will protect you. But really, it starts at the top. It starts at the executive level, and knowing what your actual security stature is, knowing that you do have the right things in place, and that you are asking the right questions about how proactive is my approach to my security, to make sure that IT, zero trust, is they doing what they say they're doing. So it's really important to know what your stature is. And then that covers IT and the executive level, but also on the vendor level, knowing that your vendor can be trusted, that they've set up access controls to ensure that your data stays private and, most importantly, secure. And then there's the biggest threat of them all, or the biggest attack surface of them all, which is your users. And your users need to know, how do I identify these potential and fraudulent activities, be that in my web browser or emails that I'm receiving, or even, like Brendan said, phone calls. How do I know how to identify these things?
Yeah, so it makes sense, and we wanted to make sure everybody's on the same page with this. It's not just one person's responsibility. You have to have this sort of multi-role approach that that you have the executive setting the culture, the users understand, and the staff understands how important cybersecurity is. IT is protecting people in case they make a mistake and click on something that they shouldn't, and you're choosing vendors that take cybersecurity super seriously, right? And we've seen examples where they don't take it seriously enough, and it's not good. So let's kind of think in your environment when you're sort of thinking in sort of basic terms. There's a bunch of signs that you're operating at higher risk, higher cyber risk, right? And so here's some relatively straightforward, easy stuff that will maybe take you from slightly concerned to very concerned, but it should be in these sort of cases. So number one, if you have on-premise servers. If you have on-premise servers, you are operating at a higher risk level because the attack surface is bigger. It's easier to get into. You're using older technology to protect your network. There's a whole bunch of reasons. Number two, we've seen lots of businesses without cybersecurity insurance. If you're not properly insured, you are operating at a way higher risk level. Number three, no disaster recovery or incident response plan. If there's not a plan to recover from a disaster, deal with a disaster, deal with a breach, that sort of stuff, the way that you deal with a breach is going to be much weaker. And if you ask the question, hey, when was the last time your disaster recovery plan was tested? And you get the shrug of the shoulders, that's not good. And then last but definitely not least, there's a reactive approach to IT. The IT approach, the IT department, the outsourced IT team is just responding to tickets and responding to requests when they come in. There's not proactive work being done. So that's a sign. Those are signs that you're operating at a high risk. So we didn't want to just kind of come in and scare you, right? We want to give you some actionable stuff. So we're going to give you five things plus a bonus, 5 things you can do right now to dramatically lower your cybersecurity risk in this new environment. And the first part, it starts with cloud-based security. So the reason that having on-premise servers is such a big kind of security flag for us is because there is fantastic new technology. Microsoft has invested billions and billions of dollars in cybersecurity, and it's all in cloud-based cybersecurity. They are not investing anymore in on-premise server-based cybersecurity. So if your authentication, when you go in and type your user and password, it goes back and pings an on-premise server, then you're not using modern cybersecurity. So if you're not using modern cybersecurity, your risk level is way up because it's going to be much easier to attack you. And when you're using cloud-based cybersecurity, it's actually built for this remote or hybrid working world that we have. It's built for people to be able to travel. You can put stuff like AJ, you do tons of work with conditional access policies, for example. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that? Because I think it's a really important part of this.
Yeah, the most brilliant thing I feel about, and Brendan knows, this is something that's really close to my heart, are those conditional access policies. So when you are traveling, that you go into a grouping, that you're able to travel, but just because you're traveling does not mean the rest of your people are exposed to the same country that you're traveling from. And it's all about limiting exposure to different countries and higher threat levels, making, like we said with Zero Trust, making sure that you are who you say you are, making sure that there's policies in place that are enforcing multi-factor authentication, and making sure that, should someone access your browser window, that they can't steal that token code that has just allowed you to log into that session. So that's really, really important. And it's really brought to us through the power of Microsoft Entra ID.
Yeah, and I think that it's important to understand. So what conditional access is it gives you the ability, if somebody's stolen a username and a password, but they're not logging in from your computer, it's going to block them. Or if it's not logging in from the country and the location that you work in, it's going to block them. Right. So you have, and this is a way of dramatically improving cybersecurity that nobody notices. You don't like the thing that frustrates so many people about cybersecurity is like, oh, I got a token and I got to do a thing. And every time I want to access something, I got to do it, this or that or the other thing. But with really good cybersecurity, you don't notice it. But the problem is you can't put this kind of conditional access in place if you've got on-premise servers and you're relying on on-premise security. So there's so many like granular policies and so many opportunities to really improve security without stopping people from being able to work. But if you haven't modernized, if you've still got those on-prem servers, you're not going to be able to take advantage of those. And as a result, you're operating at a way higher risk. All right. I think we can move on. I've ranted about that now enough. All right, AJ, let's talk about users. So one of the biggest questions we get is, well, how do we train our users? Because AJ, you said the users are the biggest threats. They're the ones.
Yeah, that is exactly right. And it's something that within the zero trust philosophy is identified as what we call insider threats. So, and mainly those are threats that come from within your organization. And there's three big three big groups of those. So we have the malicious insiders. These are the people that have walked out the door, they're disgruntled, and they have malicious intent. Then we have the complacent insiders, and they've just become complacent. They're not reporting anything. They're seeing stuff, but they're not saying stuff. And if you see something, say something. And then we have the unintentional insiders. These are the folks that may not know better, and therefore they're not reporting it. Therefore, they're not saying anything. Now, zero trust will stop the malicious insiders. Having good zero trust policies in place, the malicious insiders won't be able to do those things. But for the other two, the complacent and the unintentional insiders, we need good user training. And that all starts with training on phishing. You train your users on how to identify and how to report phishing attacks against your networks and against your email infrastructure. And then that ties into spam. How do I identify spam and how do I report spam? And teaching your users how to do that. Now, it's also important to run the tests against the environment, meaning run phishing campaigns against your user base and see who's clicking on the links, because that provides insights. And like Brendan always says, we're powered by data and AI. That gives you the data so that you can make a good business decision. So reporting on who's clicking on the links, reporting on who is not participating in the training and getting that done. And then when they have clicked on the links, are they participating in the learning opportunity that comes from that? So it's really important to train your users on all of these things.
Yeah, and that's really good point. Like one of the things we see so often is people put in user-based training and then say, okay, we've put in place Fin or KnowBe4 or any number of different training services, but nobody's actually looking to see who's done the training and who hasn't done the training, and nobody's escalating it to the managers and having them follow up with their staff and say, hey, you got to have get the training done, right? It's why we've incorporated it as part of our technification process to get to present it to our clients and say, hey, here's who's clicking on the links, here's who's doing the training, who's not doing the training. Let's make sure that they're doing the training, so we're not just checking a box with user training. I think we could go through this pretty quick. Everybody should have cybersecurity insurance. There was an alarming survey that was done in December 2023. Aviva did a survey and found that just 17% of small businesses have cyber insurance. And so cyber insurance is super important because in concert with the next thing that AJ is going to talk about, disaster recovery plan, it is what protects you and takes something from being a really big deal, really big issue, to not as big of an issue. right? You can plug into incident response professionals that the security company, or sorry, that the insurance company will fund, that can clean up your environment, can mitigate risk really, really quick. You can guard against business loss, the cost, ransom costs, all that sort of stuff. And it's not that expensive. Like it's really like the cost of it isn't huge versus the impact if you don't have it. So people, absolutely 100%, please get cyber insurance. And if you need any help, we don't sell cyber insurance. We know some folks that we can refer over to if anybody needs help or even wants to look up their cyber insurance policy. So AJ, what happens if something bad happens?
So what happens when something does go wrong and when everything starts to go wrong is you need a plan of action. You need a disaster recovery plan. And this plan should include, who am I supposed to contact? Who needs to be notified? And having that solid plan in place gets the ball rolling a lot quicker than not having that. So knowing where your backups are and how they're accessed. And then very importantly, cloud to cloud backups. So cloud to cloud backups is what we would call back in the day offsite backups, because usually we had a physical disk that we took home at the end of the day to make sure that we have a backup that is not on site. So if someone
and now
was
everything's offsite, right?
Exactly. So should anyone gain access to your environment, they can simply delete your backups if your backups resides in that same environment. So what you need to be sure of is that you have those offsite backups, and not in a physical disk form, but having it backed up offsite in another cloud. We use the Datto solution, and it works really, really well because you can also run your test restores and make sure that everything is functional and working. But it's really important to know that you are prepared. And knowing that, you need to ask your provider, when last they tested your disaster recovery capabilities? How quickly can we get back online if everything starts to go wrong? One of our really good best practices is to have a break glass account. So break glass in case of emergency, and that's a best practice backdoor that is there to, when a malicious actor has gained access to your environment and they've locked out your admins, that you can still get back into your environment and take back control.
Yeah, and that's critical. Like the backup side of things, if you have that data and you can restore quick, you can get back up and going really quickly and really mitigate an issue. If you don't, it can be really bad. Even Microsoft says in their terms and conditions you should be using a third party to back up Microsoft data, which I find is fascinating. Okay, last but definitely not least, the most important is having a really good proactive cybersecurity process in place. And here's the thing, with cybersecurity, you can have endpoint security, you can put in place MFA, you can put in place conditional access, you can put in place a this, a that, you can have SOC SIM services. There's always a thing that you can put in place in cybersecurity. But the most important thing is that there's a process and that there's oversight, that it's done by humans, that it's checking against best practices, because the cybersecurity landscape continually changes. And if there isn't a process in place that's proactively looking at your environment against best practices, then there's going to be gaps. AJ, the process that we run, the technification process we run, there's 67, I think we were talking about, there's 67 things that we look at on a monthly basis. You want to give some example?
Yes, exactly right. Yeah, currently there are 67. That list grows, but there are 67 things that we check on a monthly basis. Now, those things include, but not limited to, we verify and we test your backups. We bring up a disaster recovery environment. And we make sure that you are able to get back up and running. We double check and verify your ransomware protection for your endpoints. We review those conditional access policies that we mentioned earlier. We review those to make sure that nothing has changed in those policies and there are no exceptions to the rules. We review your endpoint protection to make sure that your endpoints are protected. And we look at your patching levels. Really, when Microsoft brings out a critical security patch, we need to make sure that that's deployed immediately. So we do verify that that is happening. And then the very important thing is reporting on that endpoint protection level, so that you know that we are looking at these things and you know that you're secure.
Yeah, and you can't just rely, like so many IT companies and IT people say, oh yeah, don't worry, we got the patching running and we've got automated this and automated that. You can't just rely on the automation. You should use the automation, use AI to battle AI. You should have that in place, but if there aren't humans that are checking it and going through and looking at the kind of stuff that AJ was just talking about, your cybersecurity risk is going to be way, way higher. Because things get changed too often. People go in, they make changes to settings, and sometimes they'll even make mistakes. And if there's no oversight, it ain't good. So we had 5 things, but then we wanted to have a little bit of a bonus item. So one of the questions we always get asked, and I saw it come up in the Q&A panel, so we'll answer it right now. People ask about password managers. Like the fundamental thing here with cybersecurity is you need to have complex passwords. You should never reuse the same password in multiple places. But AJ, how the heck can we remember all these different, very complex passwords?
Yeah, that's a very important question. How do I remember all these complex passwords? Because best practice tells me don't reuse the same password in multiple places. So to help you remember these passwords, a password manager. Now, a password manager stores your password in an encrypted fashion in a database that is meant just for you and your eyes only. I recommend Keeper from this list just because I use it personally. But yes, password manager is definitely a best practice to secure your passwords with a singular master key that only you have access to. And for all of these, for ease of access, if you ever reach a portal where you need to log into, it's simply a click of a button and it imports those credentials automatically for you. So you don't need to copy and paste anything, so that you know that you're secure there.
Yeah, and please don't lose your master password once you create it, because then you'll have it. So just you need to remember one password. Okay, so I see some questions popping up in the Q&A panel. Keep them coming. If there's stuff based on what we're saying that you'd like to have some more information about, please put something in the Q&A panel. I just wanted to take a minute and just talk through just the kind of expand on that overall approach and the thing that we believe fundamentally challenge with IT companies, IT industry, IT internal IT departments so often that the approach to technology is there's an issue, it disrupts somebody's work. IT person comes up with the solution and then fixes it and just moves on to something else. And then the same thing keeps on repeating over and over again throughout an environment, right? An email account can get hacked. Somebody could get malware. Maybe somebody gets ransomware. Maybe a file gets shared that shouldn't have gotten shared, right? And then when those things are dealt with as a reactive basis, you never really reduce risk for the overall organization. You just fix stuff, right? There's a ticket, it gets fixed, right? And it's not a good way of doing technology. And one of the reasons we do these webinars is we want to educate folks on the importance of being proactive. And to us, this is what proactive looks like. When there's an issue, it disrupts work, there's a solution, we create a best practices standard. And we've been doing this for years. We now have over 800 of these. Over 300 are cybersecurity related. As AJ talked about, there's probably 67 that we look at on a monthly basis. The rest we look at every couple months, once a quarter, some of them once a year, depending on the need to look at them. And when you have this base of standards, then you look at your technology environment, and it's much easier to assess risk because you can say, are we aligned to these best practices standards? Where are we not aligned to cybersecurity best practices standards? That's where we have a risk. And then you feed that through a business impact layer. If somebody were to use that as a vulnerability and use that to get onto our system, what's the impact on our business? Is it little? Is it a lot? And then you create a cybersecurity strategy, a cybersecurity roadmap that's really informed, that's grounded in data, that is specific to your business. That's critical important. So we take that philosophy and then we implement it, excuse me, on a series of monthly visits. We call it our techification process. So we have a dedicated team, as I mentioned, that AJ leads, and these folks all day long, they're doing at least once a month full day visits where they're auditing, reviewing, and aligning our clients to those cybersecurity best practices. So a typical visit, AJ's guys will kind of look at around 150 or so different best practices and go through and say, yes, no, are we aligned to those best practices or not? And then either align them or escalate it to our consulting team, who, if it needs approval from the client or if it requires money, is going to put it into their cybersecurity roadmap and make a recommendation and say, hey, this is a big risk. We think we should do this because X, Y, Z. And that is the foundation of our system. So while the patching and the maintenance and stuff is happening, the backup monitoring is happening, all that stuff, the support desk is there for our clients, the project implementation and stuff is happening. The foundation of what we do is a techification process and the consulting process, and most IT companies don't do that. All they have is they have a help desk, they have a bunch of remote monitoring and maintenance stuff, and they do some project work, and maybe an account manager calls every once in a while. But that's not a proactive approach. It's super, super reactive, and we don't like it. We don't think it's a good approach. If you do want more information, we are happy. This little QR code will take you to a page on our website that there is we're offering a free cybersecurity risk assessment. So if you sign up before the end of the month, better just to do it today. We'll send a follow-up email with a link to this as well. And I think Arem's I've put something into the Q&A. I'll actually just put it in right now. So in the Q&A, there's a link to register for the cybersecurity risk assessment. We'll go in and we'll send you a quick questionnaire that'll ask you a bunch of questions about your environment, what technology you're using, what applications, what it looks like, that sort of stuff. We'll hop on a call for half an hour or less and say, hey, here are the biggest risks. If we were you, here's kind of the top level cybersecurity roadmap that we would take to better secure your environment. Oh, and one more thing, which our folks have asked me to do a quick promo on. We have a Techify AI Summit coming up in June. AJ, this is a big event. You're going to be part of it too.
Yep.
So we're going to be down at the Microsoft Canada headquarters. It's a half-day event. We're getting all sorts of great speakers. We've got a CEO panel. We've got an expert from Microsoft. We have our team. We have a whole bunch of case studies. We're going to be going through at least 50 different use cases for AI. We find the deal with AI is so many people are talking about the hype of it and the overall strategy. Not many people are talking about how do I actually implement? What could I actually do? How can I take this and apply it to my business? So we're going to have at least 50 different ways, and we're going to present it in a fun little event. That event is already, we sent out one email. We've got 150 spots, and we now have over 80 people registered for it. So the space is running out. That Summit Pass code will, because you came to our webinar, that'll give you a free pass to attend the event. But that's only until the end of the month. So, and there's a link to that in the Q&A as well. And you're welcome to send a note to either AJ or I, the old-fashioned way. Through email, or you can call, or various ways of getting call, text, whatever. You can get a hold of us. So that is our cybersecurity webinar. We have some questions that have been posted online that we'll go through now. So AJ, one question. Harvey asks, which password manager is recommended? of the 5 presented. I think he might have missed your comment on that. Do you want to just talk about
Yeah.
why you use the one that you use?
For me, it's really about the tested security behind it, and Keep has really shown that they are a really good password manager, and also the ease of use. So I would definitely recommend Keeper. Out of the ones up there, all of them are really good password managers, but Keeper really just stands out for me it's really quick, it's really fast, and it gets the job done.
Yeah, so here are the ones that we put up. I like Dashlane too. That's one that I've used before. But a lot of these are really good. But you heard it from AJ. Keeper is the one. That's the keeper. Cybersecurity insurance. How do you decide what types of coverage and the extent of coverage? That's a great question. So we have a process. We've helped a whole bunch of clients with this, bringing in some insurance folks. What you look at from in terms of the coverage is it's like a risk analysis of what's the most common types of hacks. What could happen to my business? What's likely? Well, the most common things are you're going to get malware. It could potentially lead to money being wired, like wire fraud. It could lead to ransomware. A lot of times, business email compromise, like people's emails accounts are getting hacked. That's the most kind of common stuff we're seeing. So having coverage against that, and then looking at what the most common the value of those breaches and the most common claims out there. And there's a whole bunch of data that good insurance folks have that say, okay, based on your size of business, here's what the claims that we've seen and what the potential risk. And then the other bit that you want to make sure that's included in your coverage is the response, right? Harvey, if you want to do a call, we can do a call after the fact and sort of talk through. But there's things like incident response. You should have an incident response team that you can get access to right away. There's reputation management that should be included in your insurance policy, and there's kind of a checklist of a whole bunch of things. So it's not just about the dollar value. It's about when something happens, do you have a team of people that you can just kind of call and boom, they're on there. IT is great, but a lot of IT can be generalist. We help people. We've gone in and helped people recover from cybersecurity incidents that they sort of call us in, new clients and stuff like that. I still really think like if you can have a 200-person team that specializes in incident response and forensic investigation and stuff like that, and that's included in your cyber insurance for a few $1,000s a year, it's a nice thing to have. Okay, let's do we do a couple more. So Mariela asks, can I use the password manager that's installed on my computer and also on my phone? Are they safe?
The answer is mostly yes. But once again, trust but verify. It really depends on what type of password manager you have installed. If it is through Microsoft Edge, then you are as protected as Edge is protected. So the policies in place, the conditional access policies and the other security policies, they apply to Microsoft products. So if you're using Microsoft Edge on both your mobile and your PC, yes, that's a good free option to use. In my recommendation, I would always recommend a dedicated password manager tool.
That is it's an excellent point. Like it's so, like it's easy just to use the password manager on your phone if you got an iPhone or Android phone and stuff like that. It is easy. It's better than not using a password. There's like, if you talk to somebody and say, hey, do you ever reuse the same password? And they kind of don't answer you. You know that there's a risk there. Let's just take from the list of what people are concerned about, from the survey. I think we've talked a lot about human error, folks clicking. We talked about how to stay up to date, informing users. I think the data loss bit we could just touch on a little bit. A lot of people were talking about a data leak, information being stolen, that sort of thing. So AJ, I think what would be useful here is if we talk a bit about take that conditional access bit, and the data loss prevention policy. So like if you modernize your environment and you're using SharePoint and you're using Microsoft Entra ID and you have a bunch of Excel and Word documents that are super sensitive, very important, might be PDF files as well. How do you make sure that they don't leak out, that they don't get shared, that they don't get out into the universe?
Right. So there's multiple ways of doing this. I mentioned before conditional access because they're inside Microsoft, but they are protected by those policies. But making sure that things don't leak out is making sure that you have your SharePoint divided up, that you have an external sharing site and that you have an internal site, which can only be accessed by authenticated users. If you don't have that properly set up and you're not taking that proactive approach, then you might run into problems where these documents are being shared directly from where they're located. The best practice standard is to have an external facing. And once again, educating your users on what can go into that and what cannot go into that. Beyond that, if someone tries to share a document via email with someone and they set it as an attachment, there are very specific data loss prevention policies that are in place in the Microsoft 365 environment that will just stop that message dead in its tracks to make sure that you're not leaking out that important information that you don't want out there.
Yeah, I can remember a story when one of our new clients called us up and said, one of my staff was just really upset because they tried to email their tax return to themselves, and it got blocked by our email system because it had a social insurance number in it. And he's like, "This is fantastic. This is great." And the other example that I like to give is, say you have a Excel file that has all sorts of pricing data and information in it, and somebody quits. Maybe it has your customer list, and so this person quits and they copy this onto a thumb drive. If you have data loss prevention policy set up, even though they have this Excel document on thumb drive, they go to the new company that could be a competitor of yours, and they plug in the thumb drive and they double click on this document. This document goes to Microsoft 365, to the Microsoft Cloud, and says, does this person have access? Are they allowed to open this document? And it says no, because they no longer work at this company. Even though it's physically on that thumb drive, they can't access it. So it's a fantastic way to protect critical information that you have from data losses, data leakage, that sort of stuff, which is a big kind of concern and threat. So there's lots of different examples we could give, but I thought it'd be good for, I appreciate those examples you gave, and I thought it'd be useful for people to hear a little bit more. So that's what we've got. Thank you so much for everybody who's attended our cybersecurity webinar this month. AJ, thank you for joining me. That was awesome.
Always happy to be here.
All right. Have a great day.
Thanks, folks.